Do you know what's the most annoying thing I hear people say? It's that cartoons are great when they manage to appeal to both kids and adults, which is something I both agree and disagree depending on what the statement has to back it up. Because on one hand, good cartoons that were made for kids usually get recognized by adults for how great they are because of how their critical mind has developed over the years, unlike children who usually has a strong tolerance for mediocrity. But on the other hand, this statement could also mean, and I've heard people argue this before, that cartoons need to add hidden adult jokes and mature themes so that adults can appreciate and relate to, which is an idea I've never fully subscribed to. I mean, sure, if cartoons manage to have hidden innuendos and mature themes hidden in certain concepts, I tend to fixate on them more, which is why I like shows like Regular Show and Steven Universe. However, I would never say that this is the key to success. There's this cartoon called Ruby Gloom that's about a bunch of children who live together in this big house, and the entire show is pretty innocently lighthearted with not a lot of mature themes. In fact, the only time this show gets slightly mature is when Misery starts acting pessimistic and opens up to the possibility of fatal and dark consequences. Besides that, I would say this show is very kid friendly, and since I'm not a child anymore, you would think that this show wouldn't resonate with me, and yet it does. I really like Ruby Gloom. It's a show I immensely enjoy. It's funny, the characters are likable, the stories are amusing, and it feels like a lot of heart was put in. I don't necessarily think that implementing adult themes in a cartoon for kids boosts the show's appeal to me and gives an advantage over cartoons that don't do that. If that were the case, I would enjoy the likes of Total Drama Island and Cow and Chicken, and yet I don't like any of those shows. A few months back, I was watching an episode of Sophia the First by myself, and it actually wasn't that bad. It was kind of fun to watch. Although I'm a bit distant from Sophia the First target demographic, so it's not really a show that attracts me. Because the thing is, I actually do believe target demographics matter, at least on some extent. I believe every person has their own set of preferences that do impact how much they enjoy or hate a movie or television show. If you take me for example, my favorite sitcom of all time is Community, and part of the reason why is because the show references geek culture, makes fun of overused tropes in television and cinema, and parodies movies and board games. And in parallel, I don't like Baby Daddy because it embodies everything about relatively family-friendly sitcoms that I'm completely desensitized by. And the thing about people having different preferences is that at times some preferences do line up with others from a number of people, which ends up creating different demographics based on what kind of person they are, and that's completely natural. I'm sure if I made a show that's meant to appeal to my taste in television and pay homage to the stuff I like, the show would probably be targeted to the more nerdy demographic. But does that mean that I can only enjoy television shows and movies that specifically appeal to my demographic? Well, I can't speak for everyone, but for me personally, the answer is no. Around last year, I had friends who were genuinely surprised that my favorite movie ever was Inception, and not some geeky science fictional or superhero movie, which was something I always found to be hilarious. Now granted, if they had taken into account that I'm a huge fan of Christopher Nolan and that I'm fascinated by reality questioning movies, their reaction probably would have been different, but even then, I can't say I blame them for being surprised that my favorite movie wasn't something like, let's say, Spider-Man 2. Something else that makes the idea of Inception being my favorite movie to be pretty odd is how the relationship between Cobb and Mal is very crucial to the main story, and if you know me, you would know that I'm not a huge fan of romantic stories. I have several reasons why, but to make things simple, I find it hard to relate to them, and I'm sick of how American cinema feels the need to make every protagonist have a love interest even when it's not that needed, because apparently American audiences are incapable of relating to fictional characters unless they have a love interest. However, despite that, I still love Inception. Heck, I really enjoy Cobb and Mal's side of the story, mainly because I thought it was cleverly well written, especially after the twist right around the end of the movie, which I won't spoil, just watch it for yourself. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that even though I'll always have the tendency to latch on to what appeals to me preferentially, there are multiple layers I value in a show and movie that don't have much to do with my taste. Like things that are more technical such as pacing, cinematography, music, characters and how much I relate to them emotionally, the story, the writing, the performances, etc. And the most important thing is how much passion the people behind the product put in. Things like Whiplash, Tangled, Pretty Little Liars, and K-On! Aren't necessarily stuff that line up with my taste and comfort zone, but I enjoy all of that stuff, some more than others. Also, even if a movie fits the genre that appeals to me the most, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'll enjoy it. Take for instance Suicide Squad. You should know that I'm a huge fan of superheroes, even if it's not very apparent on my channel. You should also know that I love when a story is from the perspective of supervillains. Not to mention, I'm fond of the Joker as a character. Harley Quinn, I haven't had much exposure to Batman stories that feature her, so I'm kinda neutral towards her, but based on her character profile, she seems to be potentially amusing. And yet, despite all of this hinting at the possibility of me finding some enjoyment out of this movie, I deeply despise it. I hate how terribly paced this movie was, in which we had to spend more than 30 minutes watching a bunch of boring exposition introducing the characters, which, by the way, if you want to develop their characters, make sure you're patient enough to give time and speed that they need, which is what this movie didn't do, and as a result I ended up not caring for any of those characters. The tone, music choices, and cinematography were at times very jarring. The bar scene was one of the most forced attempts at transitioning from the second to the third act, while also giving a quote-unquote special and emotional moment with the characters. The movie felt very try-hard. The side plot with Rick Flag and Enchantress bored me to death. You can't just say that they're in love with each other by having Amanda Waller briefly explain that during the exposition dump without actually giving us a look at their relationship. And I don't even want to bring up a certain character who was advertised a lot more than he probably should have. Although after witnessing his performance, I'm not even sure if I should feel disappointed or relieved. As you can tell, I don't like this movie. Not a single bit. And the fact that it's a part of the superhero genre, which is something that appeals to me, doesn't change squat. This is honestly one of my least favorite movies that I saw last year. I'm not even joking when I say that I'd much rather watch Winx Club than watch this mess of a movie. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that don't immediately judge how much enjoyment you can get out of a film or television show based on the surface. Sure, it's okay to stick with what works for you the most. In fact, that's what I do for the most part. But sometimes it's okay to step out of your comfort zone. Who knows, you might end up discovering a side of cinema that you actually like. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Bye for now.